Who art thou that repliest against God? Shall the thing formed say to him that formed it, Why hast thou made me thus? Hath not the potter power over the clay of the same lump to make one vessel unto honor and another unto dishonor? Isn't that amazing? And Paul is basically saying, who are you to question God? Who am I to question God? He is God. We are his creation. We need to come to him in humility. We need to come to him in submission. We need to submit to his power, to his knowledge, to his omnipotence, to his omniscience, submit to his love, submit to his holiness, submit to his godliness and his character. We need to come to him with humility today, rather than trying to be smart Alex before the throne of God. Rather than thinking that we can come to God in any way, any time, and not trusting him, not respecting him, not reverencing him. You need to trust God today by getting to know him. He will never fail you when you trust him. Listen to his word in Deuteronomy 32:4. He is the rock. He's solid as a rock. His word is perfect, for all his ways are judgment. A God of truth and without iniquity, just and right is he. Even the holy angels, when they see the 7 vials going down, the 7 last plagues going down to this earth, which will be happening soon, when they see these things happening, they say, just and true are thy ways, O God. Their judgments are always right, because they see God. They see him on a daily basis. They have experience with him, and those who have an experience with God are not going to be so concerned about trying to figure God out, but they'll be concerned with following God and trusting in him. That is what we do today. Today we have become so scientific and so we want to figure everything out that God does and everything God says right down to the letter, and in the end we are more confused than anything else because we don't come to God in the right spirit of humility. There's people out there now in universities trying to tell people that this word is not inspired anymore. Some of it is inspired and some of it is not inspired. They're trying to dissect the word rather than submitting to the word of God. You don't learn about God by doing that. You learn about God when you come in humility before his word and you long to learn what he wants to teach you. A spiritual man is not one who questions God at every opportunity and every trouble and every trial. A spiritual man, a spiritual woman is one who trusts God even through the fire, even through the problems, even through the trials of life. They submit to the sovereignty of God, because he is all-powerful. James 4:7 says, submit yourselves therefore to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Submit to God, don't question God. Once you start questioning God, you enter into Satan's enchanted ground, and those questions you'll never be able to answer because you don't have the wisdom to do it. Satan comes in, he's wiser than you, overtakes your intellect, and then you become a practical atheist, and there's so many of those around today. They claim that they believe the Bible, they claim that they read the Bible, but they don't actually believe what God says. They're always ready to question what he says. I love the quote of Samuel Rutherford, a great Puritan preacher in Scotland in the 1600s. He says this, duties are ours, events are God's. When our faith goes to meddle with events and to hold account upon God's providence and begin to say, how will you do this or that, God? We lose ground. We have nothing to do there in that place. It is our part to let the Almighty exercise his own office and steer his own helm. There's nothing left for us but to see how we may be approved of him. I love that quote. Duties are mine. The results and the events are God's. But so much of the time, brothers and sisters and my dear friends, we end up dwelling too much on circumstance rather than on our duties. When we fall in a bad circumstance, what are we always focusing on? We're always focusing on the circumstance. Oh, he did this to me. Oh, I went through this problem. Oh, you don't know what I'm going through right now. And we've become PhDs at the problem, but then when it comes to our duty in the problem, then we grow strangely silent. What does God say we ought to do when we find ourselves in uncertain situations? We have to get on our knees. We ought to open the Word of God. We ought to seek his mind for the things that we're going through. And we ought to always behave as Christians even through the trial. But oftentimes we don't do that. We make events ours, but events are God's, and we make duties God's. God has to do this for me. Why hasn't God done this for me? Why is God doing this to me? That's not an area that you and I need to meddle. If we know God loves us with an everlasting love, and if we know his one object is for you and I to be in heaven, we know that He will allow certain things to come into our lives to slap us and wake us up and make us realize that this world is not our home. Because when God leaves us to ourselves, we become comfortable in this world. When God begins to wake us up as to our true condition, it is then that we realize we need Him. That's how much He loves us. That's why Paul says, who are you? Who are you that argues against God? What are you showing by arguing against Him? Let God steer His own helm. It's His world. It's His church. Your life is His. Let Him steer it. He knows what He's doing. And I love what Rutherford ends up with saying here. There's nothing left for us but to see how we may be approved of Him. Our duty is how God may approve us even through the trial. Not how other people can approve us, not what other people say about us, not what we can do to earn our own merit or favor. It's what God says about us. And you know, Samuel Rutherford, he was put in jail because he stood up for the truth of God. He was a covenanter, and he stood up for God at a time when the kings and the queens of the land were in control of the church, and they were basically telling the people that whatever they said went. And they tried to bring in papal things into the Anglican Book of Common Prayer, papal aspects of worship. And these Puritans, who they are called, and these covenanters, they stood up and they said, we are not going to worship, we're not going to go back to the papacy and worship Catholic doctrine. We are Protestants. And for that, they were kicked out of their churches. They were thrown out of their homes because their homes were basically paid for by the kingdom. And they were even given restraining orders against their churches. They couldn't come within certain miles of their congregations because they had stood up for God. And some of these dear men and women ended up in prison. Samuel Rutherford was one of them.